Welcome back to another episode of You and I for the Kenai. I'm here today with Coburn and Eric, and we have another guest with us to tell us her recovery story. Amber, how's it going today?
It's another beautiful day in paradise.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so just to get started, Amber, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, I'm Amber. I'm 31, I think. I'm originally from Nome. Moved here to Kenai in 1999, and I've kind of bounced all around since then. So.
How old were you when you moved here in 99? I could do the math, but how old were you?
I was like 12.
About 12.
I think 12, yeah.
So that must have been hard. Because I'm just obviously like outsider guessing. Don't mean to like assume too much, but I assume life in Nome is different than life here.
Absolutely.
Right.
It was so crazy because, in a small town like that, we had 3 school buses. They were red, green, and blue, and I moved here and it was the beginning of 6th grade, and I didn't know where I lived here in Kenai. Everything was so big. There was stoplights. It was just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
My first day of school was really overwhelming. I didn't know anybody. There was 20 different buses. I didn't know where I lived. It was a really hard experience to move from everything I'd ever known and to live here. So
Yeah. I know when I was about 12 or 13, I believe, I moved from a small town in Montana, in like southeast Montana, Hardin, Montana, which is like, you may know Battle of the Little Bighorn, like Custer's Last Stand, like right like on and in some ways in or a little bit outside the like a very large reservation in Montana, the Crow Agency Reservation. And then I moved to western Montana, to Bozeman, Montana, and it wasn't like, I don't think it was as large of I certainly don't believe it was as large of a change as a Nome to Kenai, but I know that it was a large change, significant cultural differences, and in maybe some more like, complex or like finer ways, not huge differences, but all that to say, like, it was a big adjustment for me. And like looking back, like, I think at that age, like, you don't really, you know that something's hard, but you don't know exactly what it is. And like looking back, I think like that was a hard experience for me. Like that was a big adjustment to make. So that's all to say. Like, I could imagine that's a tough experience from like moving and trying to adjust.
it was extremely difficult. I think maybe, and now that I look back at it, I've never really seen it like this, but that's kind of where my struggle began. Actually, when I moved here, there was a lot more influences everywhere. I started smoking cigarettes when I was like 8. It was like last day of 2nd grade,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it kind of started back then too, and
Right.
and I tried alcohol here or there, but when I moved here, it was,
How'd that go down the last day of 2nd grade?
like I got off the school bus, and I had a best friend. Her name was Mona, and we went down to, so in Nome there's this big seawall of rocks, and there's this platform where people could take pictures and stuff, and we went underneath this platform, and she started smoking a cigarette, and she's like, "Do you want to try it?" And I was like, "Okay." Yeah. So I tried it, and she was like, "You didn't even inhale, and you're wasting my cigarette." And so she taught me how to inhale, and that's all I remember about the last day of 2nd grade. Yeah, I had my backpack, and that was it. So, and I was smoking cigarettes, and so things like that, I mean, happen in Nome all the time, I guess.
Sure.
People start doing things really young, but there wasn't like, I don't remember in Nome ever being around like pot or hard drugs or anything like that. It was just a whole lot of drinking. Everybody drank. So, but yeah, when I moved here, that first or second summer, as I started hanging out with older kids, they smoked cigarettes and smoked pot and drank, and things just kind of went downhill from there.
So you move here about 12, and then what? You go to school here, and
I went to school here, and after the first year, I really didn't like it. I didn't really have a lot of friends. There wasn't really, I was kind of, I just didn't know anybody.
The connections.
Yeah, and I've always had a really hard relationship with my mother, so Even before we left Nome, I would spend a lot of time at her sister's house, at my aunt's house. It was safe there. There was boundaries and structure, and I really needed that as a kid, and I spent a lot of time there. Yeah. So after 6th grade, I left. I left my mother and got on a plane, and I went back to Nome to live with my aunt, and I did that till 8th grade. So that 2 years was like, it was amazing, I had, dreams and inspirations. Here in 6th grade, I had one teacher, my math and science teacher, who really pushed me to excel. As much as I didn't want to be there with all the other kids and stuff, she told me one time, you're going to do great things. You're really smart, and you should really apply yourself in this way. So I left there, and I always remembered that teacher and what she told me. So I went back to Nome, and I played sports. All of my friends were there. I did really well in school, and I had dreams of thriving, academically and on the sports. I had, before my freshman year in high school, there were a couple of college volleyball coaches that were really interested in, my skill as a volleyball player. And I remember being motivated like that. I'm good at something, and I'm going to thrive, and I'm going to excel, and I'm going to be a scientist or something, or a doctor, or I'm going to do these things. And so after 8th grade was over, I came back down to Kenai for it was only supposed to be a weekend. And I tried smoking pot one time. I'd done it before, but this time I was like,
I'm gonna inhale.
I'm gonna inhale. And so I did, and I was stoned for 3 years or whatever. I don't even know how long it was, but I was stoned. And I started freshman year out at Skyview High School, and I was there for a couple of weeks, and then I just never went back. I started drinking and partying, so it was just alcohol and pot then. But I got pretty bad.
But it was a lot of it. It sounds like
it was a lot,
and constant.
Constant, and
what motivated the move back? Because you said it was only supposed to be a weekend.
I was just stoned. I didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
I didn't. My aunt and my uncle were really hard on me. They were hard on me because they expected more out of me. More, and I was like, I don't know how much better I can be. I'm like a 3.8 grade point average, and I do all of these things, and on top,
Yeah.
But they always expected more out of me because they knew that I could do more.
Sounded like
for myself.
You liked that at first.
I did, at first. But it was like, I came into it.
Couldn't wear them.
I came into a depression, and throughout this whole time, from my moment of birth to that point in time, I was in and out of foster homes. My parents couldn't take care of me. My dad drank, and he was really abusive, and my mother didn't want to do anything to upset my dad. So she just, let it happen, because he would just it was really, really hard growing up in that.
Yeah.
So I was, we were in a foster home, me and my sister, and then my other 2 siblings got adopted out because they were too young to take care of themselves. So there was no reunification at that point for those 2. I can't remember that time period, but I remember we weren't allowed to be with my parents. My dad wasn't allowed to be there. He had to leave, and that was a condition for my mother getting us back. So, so during that time period, between 7th and 8th, those 2 years, those 2 school years, I was just why couldn't my mom take care of me? All these things that happened, I was starting to figure out, they weren't normal. It wasn't all right. It was really hard going through that. And when I came back for that weekend and I got stoned, it was I didn't care that any of that happened, and it was such a relief. And then I just went from there. There were a couple of times where my aunt would bring up how my other aunts and uncles thought that I'd be 15 and pregnant, dropped out of high school with dentures, and a baby daddy that beat me every day.
Wow.
Yeah, they said, just like your mother. And
what age did they tell you that?
I was like, 13 or 14.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Jeez.
So it was really kind of heartbreaking. It broke my heart to hear that from people who, should have,
They're
could have
supposed to
been
really
so,
lead you the other direction. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just kind of held on to that. I held on to that, and I drank a lot.
I think like it's interesting that you say that, because I think one thing in like as we grow up, we both have, I think, like some like hardwired, biologically driven to like our parents or other caregivers that we latch onto in just at a young age, that we expect, that we're kind of, I think, almost innately programmed to think these people are trustworthy and there to provide for me. And when that when society as well begins to say, like, these are your caregivers, these are some of the roles, and you assume these certain, like, that they're going to do these things for you. And when these, from like a hardwired stance and like a cultural stance as well, when those people that you think are like the most trustworthy and the most like fundamental providers in your life, when that doesn't happen, I think a lot of some of the like general research is that we come to get like a fundamental mistrust in the world, almost like the world becomes not a safe place, or the world is perhaps not going to provide. Like, there's a fundamental breakdown that can occur from that is really hard to come back from. It can be like very shaky, right?
It is.
And that's to put it lightly.
Yeah, it really has been a struggle in that sense. Because I did believe that,
Right.
that, so like I'm saying, I just ran with it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't remember exactly how long, but there was a point in time where I started drinking like vodka and bourbon, and I was just like,
Hard
a
liquor.
kid, yeah, and I drank it all day, every day I remember it was like maybe a whole summer. And I got really sick. And I remember there was like winter time in that too. Like, it was really frigid and really cold. There were things that happened, like I fell asleep on top of a cigarette and I burnt the house down. Like,
Wow.
and I only remember little parts of that. I remember being like, why are we in a different place? Like, and that was it. I was hospitalized to withdraw from alcohol, and then I started again. I started drinking again, and it was the second time, and I was still just, I think, 15. The second time I woke up in the hospital, and there's like a whole big period of time where I don't even remember. I woke up in the hospital, and there was a social worker there, and police. The police were there, so they weren't going to let me leave the hospital. And they didn't know like who my mother was or who my parents were, because they wanted to know that, because it had been the second time I'd been in the hospital here in Savannah. The second time within 6 months to withdraw off of alcohol, and I ended up in a foster home after that. So and that was a really big struggle too, because I went from, I barely done 2 weeks of 9th grade, supposed to be like my junior year, I think, is what it was supposed to be, but I was so behind on everything. I still had to go to school though, because that was a requirement as a foster kid. I had to go to therapy. I had to go to outpatient drug and alcohol treatment. And I didn't, at that point, I just was like, I don't think I have an issue. Like, I think I'm okay. I'm fine, So I still continued to smoke pot. I mean, I was doing like, I was abusing prescription medication, not mine, like other people's,
Right.
So I did that for a while, and I remember during treatment, like I had to take UAs all the time, and there wasn't ever a UA that I could pass. So that was over like, it was supposed to be a 9-week outpatient program, and it had been a whole year. I'd been going there weekly, and they threatened like a residential thing, and I think it was like I was like 15 when I started going to like AA meetings. They didn't really have any here, but and that was also a requirement for my rehab, was to go to AA meetings. And so I think there was a point in time where I decided, like kind of low key decided, that I didn't want to continue, drinking myself to death. Essentially, I didn't want to do that anymore. So, but I still struggled with it. I mean, you know, I'm 31 now and I have almost 3 years clean. So
Yeah. So I think it's kind of off topic, but on a little bit. Being 16 and attending AA meetings with mostly adults, right? Mostly.
yeah, I think there was a lot of people that thought I was like somebody's kid and I was taking
Right.
along. Yeah.
But you have maybe one peer in a meeting, right? I mean, maybe another like 17 or 18-year-old, right? But for the most part, these people are going to be 20, 30, 40, 50, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe that a teen being put into like these kinds of situations can be, I think, from that perspective, extremely difficult. One, going to the AA meetings, being vulnerable, opening yourself up, like accepting maybe you have some barriers to overcome. Though that's going to be difficult in itself. I mean, that's a task in itself. But then it says you're 16 and all these people are going to be much older than you, different periods of life. I think adolescence is a unique period in life, right?
It's like super hard. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when I hear, sometimes I've heard people that have been like young and they're thrown into not thrown in, but they're in an outpatient or an inpatient with mostly adults, and I think there may be, and I think it's maybe a resources thing. You know, maybe we don't have the resources necessarily for just a teenager AA or whatever. But anyway, I could imagine that would be very difficult. Just the distinct differences in life.
It wasn't hard to be in the meetings with the older people.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard for me to believe that I wasn't ever going to drink again.
Right. That's a long time.
Yeah, that is a long time.
Even though I lived to
16.
65,
Yeah.
it's 50 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there were people who didn't believe that that I had a big enough problem to be there.
Sure.
And sure. I heard things like I drank more than you spilled and stuff, and I'm like, well, that might be true, but I think I have a little bit of a problem. And
Right,
it was
right.
like,
Yeah.
it was really really different to be the youngest one in the crowd, and there were people that welcomed me and told me that if I never had to drink again. There was another person there who, I think when I was like 16 or 17, he had just turned 21, and he had, I think, 3 or 4 years sober.
Oh, okay.
And they celebrated that he turned 21, and he didn't have to go to the bar and party, like every other, because he has a problem, and I think he's still clean and sober to this day. But yeah, which is pretty amazing. But they have this reading about the promises, and these things in the promises I didn't come to yet. Like, I didn't come to a point where I needed to recover my life. I didn't come to a point where all of these, I didn't have anything to wreck, really. So,
yeah. I think some of the basic curriculum, great.
Uh-huh.
I think maybe they've already done something like this, but I think a fundamental adjustment for adolescents, in just kind of to meet the same ends, might be appropriate. Make it a little more fitting to where they're at in life.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of teenagers who get it and who would do that.
Sure.
I just wasn't one of them,
Right.
by any means. I don't know. Life was really hard, and I was in 2 different foster homes. That stint of time in the foster homes, I ended up aging out of the foster care system, and these people actually adopted me last year, which is pretty cool. But
That's really sweet.
yeah, so and they're my parents,
Yeah.
and they've seen me through some really big struggles.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them through our struggles as a family.
Yeah.
Partially, mostly. So, and then I have another sister who we aged out together, but they saw through a lot of things. Things that we in ways that we've affected the family in such a way that it's like, my parents have adopted my sister's children, and they're 10 and 8. But anyhow, I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
As did I.
Yeah.
It happens.
So and then also while I was a teenager, I remember when we lived in Nome, we did the DARE program, and I remember we talked about how drugs were really bad and like how don't not even once, and I remember being like scared.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, and the first time I ever tried like meth, I was like, oh my gosh, like, and I was like, I'm totally gonna wreck my life now, because I really enjoyed being high like that, and it was such a different realm, and I yeah, from that first time that I ever tried it, it really, there was this like stereotype that I had in my mind about it, and it was like from that moment on, like I totally just forgot that I had these goals and dreams and aspirations, and I forgot that I wanted to do something different with my life. I didn't want to be like how my aunts and uncles told me I was going to be. So I made it a point to like not get pregnant and not lose my teeth. But I totally forgot. To this day, I'm so regretful because if I hadn't have just done that one time, if I hadn't have, been like, okay, I'll try it, even though I was scared, I was so scared to try it, I'm really regretful of that. But today, today is a little bit different, because I still get to use at least my experience, because I never thought or believed that I would be addicted, like that I would be a junkie. Like I never, ever believed that,
Yeah.
I had these like great dreams for my life, and I just just on that note, that like I absolutely did not have to follow what anybody else set out for me. I did not have to go with any of that. I made my own choices and I did what I did. And today I get to share with people about how I didn't ever mean to become addicted. I never ever meant for that to happen. I never meant to like hurt the people that I love. I never meant to hurt the people that love me. I never meant any of that.
Now, with the DARE program, what you were talking about was like not even once, and how that scared you. Do you think that contributed to, you try it once and then you all of a sudden you kind of give up because you're like, oh well, I tried it once, so it's kind of over? Or did you go into it with the expectation of, I'm just gonna do it once and it's never gonna happen again?
I think after I tried it once, it was like, okay, I could do this on the weekends. Like I could do this. Like I'll be okay. I could do this on the weekends or just during the winter time, or just like a long weekend party. I can manage this. This isn't that bad,
It wasn't as scary as you thought it was gonna be, maybe.
Right. Well, I mean, I totally believe that I could do this, but I don't have to be a drug addict.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I could just smoke crack on the weekends, like, and it'd be okay.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't. So there I was, almost aged out of the foster care system, because I turned 18 my senior year, what was supposed to be my senior year, and like 3 weeks before graduation, I still needed 12 credits to graduate high school. I missed the whole time. I ended up getting my GED, and I was working 2 full-time jobs, and I was going to make it, I was going to do it, and I think that was, no. So, and then I started drinking again, started partying, went through like a really bad breakup, like the first love of my life, went through that.
That's rough. Dude.
Yeah.
I went through one of those too. When
Yeah,
I was,
so-
when I was a teenager.
So then it was like the end of the world,
Right.
And so I started, doing drugs. I started smoking oxys, I started smoking meth, snorting Xanax, drinking alcohol, just partying, and I did that. I quit both of my jobs, and I was just running around being crazy with a group of people that I probably had no business with, And then I got to smoking meth all the time. All of the time. That was all I did, was just, smoked meth. I came to a point where I was like, I think I need help with this, and I really don't want to keep doing this. And it was winter time, and I think this was before they started doing this thing where you like have to withdraw completely from drugs and alcohol and stuff. But I went to my parents' house. Because I turned in this, just higher than a kite, turned in this application for Serenity House, and they ended up calling. They called and said I needed to be there tomorrow at whatever time, or 2 days from now or whatever. And I went to my parents' house, and I just I stopped, and I remember I was still coming down because I've been high for so long, but I was still coming down, and I packed a bag and I went into treatment. And back then they had the treatment center on a bluff in this like log cabin thing, and I was there for like 60 plus days.
Whoa.
And
That's a while.
and the cool thing is that I graduated that part. So I didn't graduate high school, and
Right.
but that was the first thing I finished. I completed. I was just 18 or 19 then, and I finished the whole program, outpatient, everything. Got my little certificate, and
That's awesome.
yeah, and I just I'm still making like reckless decisions because I was still a teenager. I was still young, and I think I went that time clean and sober. I went a year and a half, and then I started drinking again, and that was it.
Yeah.
I was still semi-functional, but I drank every day for.
Was that kind of one of just those like forever's a long time decisions? You know what I mean? Like, you're like I'm 20, like I should be able to like drink on the weekends, or like I can do this responsibly. Like
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I remember being like, oh, I'm 21 now, and I think I have a handle on this.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm clean. Like I can have a beer here and there.
Mhm.
Well, I didn't even start with beer. I was like, well, I totally drink this Jack Daniels right now, like or Crown Royal. I'm okay. Like
Mhm.
this feels good. I'm doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Doing things with my life. I have a good group of friends.
I imagine you probably say like, I don't smoke meth.
Yeah.
Right, I don't smoke meth
that's
anymore.
That's a good
Yeah,
rationalization
right.
to like get to like
Yeah,
drink.
that actually. Yeah, I don't do drugs anymore, so I'm
Right,
okay.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The drugs were really the issue, and I'm okay with alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I heard this. I'm sure you probably heard something similar, but somebody told me, they said, yeah, this person had been clean for a while. They said, sometimes people say to me, I think I've said this in a podcast before. They say, oh yeah, sometimes people say to me that, oh, I think I can drink and not use. Like I can drink, and she says, yeah, you can, like maybe like for a month or two, but probably not long term. Like
Yeah,
you
no,
probably
it doesn't.
not forever.
For now.
Yeah, like for now, you can for now, right?
So I continued with my path of self-destruction there for a while. I drank and I couldn't hold a job, because I was so unreliable and so out of control, basically. But I did try to keep my life together. I drank and I drank and I drank, and then I ended up. I was pregnant. I think it was like 24, 25 maybe. And then I was pregnant, and that was it. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke cigarettes. I didn't. Everything stopped. And I had this amazing little boy, and he wasn't really that little. He was like a toddler. But he was like 10, almost 10 pounds, a really short, fat little baby. And he was my little everything. Like my whole life was like, this is why I get to, like, I am his mom, and that's the coolest thing ever. I think I went, so, the whole pregnancy, and then maybe about a year after he was born, I started drinking again. Like, I was, like, drinking little Boda boxes, and I was like, if I have one, like, I'm okay with this one Boda box, like, because it's, like, this big.
Yeah.
And then before I
So
knew
you
it, I
could
was,
actually fit quite a bit of wine in those boxes.
well, they were the tiny, they were the,
Oh, the little,
the
yeah.
little
Juice
ones.
box things.
Yeah.
Almost?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there were like different brands, so of course I had to try those too. And then me and my son were living at his great uncle's house in Chugiak, and his great uncle's kids were there. So, and they were older as well. But so my son's dad was stationed in Turkey. So like 2 weeks after our son was born, he left, and he was gone the whole time in Turkey. So anyways, we were staying there, and it got to be like, I would go to the store, get my one Boda box. I worked at Old Navy then, part-time, and I would stop at from our liquor store in Eagle River and get my one Boda box and go back to the house and drink that and put my kid to sleep. And then I got to be where I would drink that, put my kid to sleep, and then run back to the store to get a Boda box, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of slowed down a little bit because I was like, that's not cool. Like, I don't need to leave my baby with their cousins, you know, so I can go get more alcohol, you know, especially since I had that one Boda box, I shouldn't have even been driving, but, and then I got to like remember what it was like to use drugs, because before I was pregnant with my first son, you know, I would recreationally do drugs on the weekends or whenever I could get away with it, I felt like.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the exact moment where I tried it one more time. I was like, you know, because I was too drunk. I, you know, drank like 6 beers and a Boda box, and I was like, I'm a little too tipsy and I have this baby right here. And I was talking to my son's dad's uncle's girlfriend. So I know that's like,
Quite extended.
yeah. And I was like, you know, it'd be really cool right now is if I wasn't this drunk and I had some meth. And she was like, oh, really? And then it was, you know, she had meth and I did it again. And I remember being like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I, you know, the next day, and that was actually the next day, I felt so guilty and so bad because I couldn't nurse my child. I couldn't like comfort him in the way that he needed me to because he was still just a baby. Because you know, with alcohol, you can wait X amount of time for X amount of drinks before you can nurse again, but you can't with meth, you know. So I deprived my kid of so much, and that was just the beginning of it. So I, you know, continued on to try to get high and be a mother and work, and it all got to be too much, and I started leaving my kid with his great uncle, and just doing whatever, you know. I got fired from my job because I think they knew I was high or something, because I couldn't focus, I couldn't talk to people, and I would sweat a lot. I would sweat a lot from coming down, and there was this like bright hot lights that was shining on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, you know, this very last time that I went out, I was out for like 2 years, and that's all I did was do drugs, drink. I mean, for breakfast, I'd have like 100 proof vodka. And, there were a couple of liquor stores in Anchorage that knew me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be in as soon as they opened to get my little pint of vodka. And
Do you think the guilt you felt for not being able to care for your kid, do you think that kind of triggered maybe sort of a slide back into that because you didn't want to feel the guilt associated with that, or how do you think it transferred from I'm just gonna do this one night because I'm drunk into kind of back into that lifestyle?
what happened with all of that was that I ran with this facade that like I was functioning, I was still a good mom, my kids still had food to eat, diapers to wear. It didn't matter how I got the money to do all this for him. It just mattered that I was still able to do that for him.
Right.
And what had transpired between that first time that I smoked it again to this other significant event was that I shot up for the very first time. And so, and that's when things got really, really crazy. And my son's uncle actually made a report against me to Office of Children's Services. So, and they don't take very lightly to reports of parents, you know, getting high on meth. They take it very seriously. So, OCS came and removed my child and took him from me, which was really traumatic. And for a long time, I held on to that, and I was like, that was they kidnapped my child, you know, that is so messed up. And I held on to that, and that became the reason I could allow myself to just fall apart, do whatever I wanted, you know. So my son's dad actually had to, take emergency leave to come back to the United States to take our child. And that took him a month, I guess. But I went, I got arrested right after that happened because they were trying to take my child from my arms. And I, shoved a social worker and I got charged with assault. So not only did they just remove my child from me, but I was, I got arrested for that. But I held on to that and I totally used that for myself and with other people, why I can allow myself to do what I was doing,
You had kind of a license to fall apart.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that was such a traumatic event. And the longer that I move away from that particular event, the more that I get to see how it was traumatic for my son, he was just a baby and all of a sudden he doesn't have me anymore. I couldn't love him. I couldn't take care of him. I was mad at him, for crying or that I couldn't be his mother anymore. I don't know. So at the end of all of that, they ended up, I pled guilty to a lesser crime, and they dropped the case. The OCS dropped the case that they had against me because my child was in the custody of somebody who could take care of him. So my son is going to be 6 this July 4th. I hadn't seen him since he was 1.5 years old, and this January I think was the first time I got to see him since then. So,
Wow.
So my timeline's a little bit blurry, a little bit fuzzy, especially through my 20s because I remember smaller events, and I remember how I felt then and what that was like. I went on with this I don't even know, rampage, I guess. I was homeless, I was unemployable. I had these limits for myself, I'll only shoot up every 6 hours because, I don't want to reach junkie status. I don't,
Right.
that'd be too far.
Yeah.
And I had these weird rituals that I would do because then I knew that I had become this stereotype that I knew that I absolutely wasn't, even though that's exactly what I was. It was rough. It was really, really rough, and I ran with that until it was October of 2015. I got arrested at the hotel here with these other people that I really didn't know. I mean, I just come down to Kenai. I really didn't like Kenai then, but I just come down to Kenai to visit with my sister. I really wanted to get back into the Serenity House program, and I was trying to figure out how I can manage that between getting high and
How can I get high and go to treatment?
yeah, how do I get into treatment? Yeah, but I was still okay, I'll call them tomorrow, and I was still shooting up, but I mean,
I'm going to backtrack just a second. I think it's really interesting because, one of the things that, we've noticed, from these podcasts, and I think that is important for people to really see, and I think that your story is, highlighting this perfectly. From these podcasts, what we've been able to see is that it's, a very human experience. People going from, just, growing up and then entering addiction, they don't somehow become they don't enter a monster status, some people picture addiction and there's a mystical element to it, or there's this element of zombie and it's very unrelatable. I mean, there's human and then there's addict, and they're just totally non-human in some ways, that people have a hard time understanding what that looks like at all. And I think because you're saying, I'm shooting up, and because I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be, essentially what it sounds like is this monster, or this junkie monster that is the addict, right?
yeah.
But really, you were the addict. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you were addicted to drugs, and I mean, however you want to define addiction, I'm not quite sure how we're going to necessarily super define it, but for nonetheless, I think your story clearly is that you were an addict. I mean, you were addicted, but what was happening is you're just like, I'm not, because then I can't be doing these things because I would be an addict, and what that's saying is that like you somehow, it seems like you have to go from like, you have to lose your humanity in that. I mean, you have to like become something completely different than what you were. However, to be this addict, but you were. I mean, you were this. So I think like we have this picture of like a standard human being and then like an addict who is somehow not human anymore. And I think your story is saying, you know, I'm shooting up, but you're still a human being. You're still that little girl with dreams and aspirations. Like you're not like working toward them at the time, but you are still like a living, breathing like person with emotions and a desire for connection and all these things that make us human, that make us lovable, that make us relatable, that make us want to love, etc., that define our core human elements, are still there. You just happen to be like really addicted to drugs at this point.
Right.
And I think it's just very interesting that we have this, because I do think our society has a fundamental breakdown where we try to understand addicts and we try to understand addiction, and there's this idea that like they are like not human anymore. There's an element of that is no longer like in that stage, but really it's all the human beings, you know, that are at this point like suffering from, you know, whether it be a disease or whether, you know, however you want to see this, like they are suffering in a way that's a lifestyle that is like of addiction, you know. And so it's just interesting to me that you're, you know, because you say I'm shooting up, but if I push it a little further, you know, then I'd be like, you make what, some sudden transfer, but you do like, you shoot up like one more time a day or something and you make some sudden transformation to like this junkie monster. I mean, that's not true. You would still, you know.
Yeah.
So that's, and that was like that. I took this belief and I was like, I would only do X amount of drugs every so often because, you know, I didn't want to admit that I had like a huge issue. I didn't want to go there with myself because then I'd have to do something different. I wasn't ready to. I didn't want to, and I wanted to figure out the best way to stay high like that for as long as I could.
Like what Eric was saying, it's the concept that someone just becomes kind of uncaring and unfeeling is not what really happens. What it sounds like in your position, you just kind of wanted to have it all. Like you want to be able to go through treatment but still be high, like still maintain the feeling but have the life that you wanted, and it's just something that's not really possible. But it sounds like you just want it all to work and to be able to feel the way you want, and it's not that you don't care about anyone else, you just want that, you know.
That's exactly, yeah. So there it was, getting arrested, and I have a kid sister who actually just finished her first year of high school, or first year of college. But she was younger when this happened, and she knew that I'd just come back into town, and she asked me, "When are you going to come and see me?" And right then the cops were like, "Well, we just found these drugs in your purse, you know." And I also had a gun, and they were like, "This doesn't look good for you." And then they tried to search my phone, and I wouldn't let them. I wouldn't give them the passcode, and that's when they arrested me. And I remember thinking,
That was probably wise.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm like,
like,
I said no, so no, you don't get to look at my phone. There's nothing in it because
even if there was, like,
I'm so paranoid. I keep
Right.
resetting it so that there's no information on it, you know. But
Yeah. I don't mean to be like anti-establishment or anything crazy, but like, let me see your no. You know.
right, you don't
Anyway.
need to see my. I already said you
Right,
could search
right.
my purse, which is fine, but
Sure.
I was like, there's just pennies and a hair
You have all
scrunchie
the
in there.
evidence you need right here.
Yeah.
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 We're
You
good.
got meth in a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It says,
Yeah.
I currently have meth.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
something ridiculous.
Mhm.
So And I remember thinking, I was like, man, this is really going to get in the way of me getting a treatment.
Yeah.
Like, this totally is messing with my plan right now. And little did I know. I was like, I'm still trying to get high.
This is really inconvenient.
These cops are killing my vibe.
Yeah.
But I come to this point and I felt like I was still okay and that I hadn't reached junkie status yet. And one of the ladies that I'd known since I was 15 years old, I remember they had to put me in this whole different cell, because I couldn't function, I guess. I don't know. I was like, I don't know why you guys put me in here.
You're
'cause
like in a detox.
I was sleeping just fine in that other room. But they put me in there, and she told me not too long ago, maybe about a year ago, she's like, I didn't even recognize you. She was walking in to the facility to do a meeting there, and I recognized her, but she looked in there, and the look on her face, I just was like, this is how people see me now.
Mm-hmm.
And she just walked in, there's this little tiny window, and she just walked right past it and came back and was like, is that you, Amber? And I was like, hi, and I was, I guess I was incoherently mumbling or something. And she told me, I was scared that you had lost yourself completely. And I was like, I didn't feel like I was that bad. I didn't feel like I felt like I had a pretty good control on it.
Mm-hmm. I think what we hear a lot is when you're in that addiction, maybe it's a disease thing, maybe I don't know what, but maybe this aspect of it is of the disease of addiction, but there is, and maybe even non-addicts possess something like this, but you have a way to really rationalize yourself to some pretty extreme places.
I think that is part of the disease. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your body prioritizing this
Yeah.
From a very physical level. Your body prioritizing this over anything else, and so I think in your mind, you know what I mean. You have to rationalize it for your body to get what it needs to survive. It's a very much a survival tactic within your body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have
so
to rationalize
crazy,
it in order to be able to make that decision to get what you need to survive.
Mm-hmm.
It was super crazy. So I think I was in there for maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, and I got bailed out. I got bailed out on this program that they had back then called 24/7, and I would just, call a number, and they'd tell me if I had to go into UA or not. So I got out.
Maybe a color or a number or something.
They would just, these people have to come to the office, and that was the voicemail recording. So, so I went in for the very first, right after I left jail, and I went in there, and I already had a needle and everything waiting in the vehicle that I was in. I had that ready to go as soon as I left that office, and so that's what happened, and that was the only time I went to that office.
Right. You had to go back a couple days later or something, right?
Yeah.
And you don't.
So they gave me a 2 or 3 week grace period
Sure.
to eventually show up, but I never did, and
So do they reissue a warrant or something?
yeah, they issued a warrant for my arrest, and I just I hid out.
On the run.
Yeah, but I didn't even go anywhere. I was
on
so
the hideout or whatever.
I was so paranoid that the cops were actually after me. I knew that.
The whole mission is
Yeah.
to find you.
Yeah.
City
And
of Kenai. Our sole mission today is find her.
And
so I
think
didn't.
that's
Probably
something
does drugs.
worth mentioning and understanding. You know what I mean?
Right.
From a very just outsider perspective. You know what I mean? No one who's been in this is that I think people kind of just assume these are bad people making bad decisions for their lives. You know what I mean? Where it's really a very physical thing. The connection in your brain and the disease will absolutely prioritize getting high and using over every single thing else. And I think that's kind of hard for people to wrap their mind around. You know what I mean? It's just how powerful that really is.
I would put myself in the craziest situations. I remember I went into, so I had this dope man who got his stuff from a bigger dope man.
Right.
So, but this one dope man I felt like was, ripping me off. So I was like, I'm just gonna go to so and so. And I did that, and so I went in there, and me and the bigger guy were like, we were coached, we were good to go, and then here comes my guy, and he was like gonna blow my brains out with a shotgun. Like, he had it to my face, and I was like, well, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna kill me? Are you gonna shoot me? I was like, do it. And he didn't, because he was like, you're not okay.
You're too crazy to be killed.
Yeah, he's like, there's something wrong with you. You're not okay. Yeah.
Wow.
So things like that would happen, and I would just be like, okay, whatever. I got what I needed,
Good
and
deal.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I'm
Save
okay.
money.
I'm good. And so and that was up in Anchorage, and it was like the town is so big, and I felt like I was so observant, and I felt like I was on this fractal enlightenment, like I was woke,
Yeah.
really I was just psychotic, I think, but
Mm-hmm.
but I really believe that a couple of people that I would do whatever with, got arrested and were getting charged with dealing drugs and stuff, and I'm like, I used to go to their house all the time, what's really going on? So I really believed that I was being watched, or that I could be in trouble
Yeah.
for some things, and so that's why I said
Yeah, you're pretty.
When I-
pretty
yeah.
paranoid, yeah.
when I got out on bail, and I knew that I had a warrant for my arrest, I was like, they're for real after me. So there was this house that I was at, and I never left. That I didn't leave that house that whole time. I just stayed high, and I ran around with assault rifle, ready to go. I don't know who gave me guns like that, but I had guns.
I don't know where I got this from.
Yeah,
This is a
and
good idea.
yeah. So.
Necessary.
Well, right, and so because I didn't need people stealing from me, I didn't have anything really left to steal. I didn't need people trying to take advantage of me. So I had this assault rifle, and I had these other guns, and I had knives, and I was in this one house, mostly in the garage, but and every once in a while I'd go and take a nap or whatever. But and it was probably 2 months that I was in this place. And the boyfriend that I had then was scared of me, and I'm not sure exactly why, but
Right.
he was scared of me. He called the police and was like, I can't do this with you anymore, and called the police, and the police came, and their words were like, we've been looking for you for a long time. And I'm like, well, that's weird, because I've been in the same house for this whole time.
Not very well.
Yeah. I was like, I listed this address. I don't know why you guys never showed up. But so that was New Year's Day, and I spent a couple of months in jail or whatever, as I still had those pending charges. And that whole, I think the first month I was in there, that's all I did was sleep. I slept and ate. I slept at night, slept during the day. I got up for them to to exchange my laundry and to get food, and I don't really talk to anybody or hang out with anybody. It's jail, and I remember being like, I don't really care to do this, but I wasn't at that point immediately. I was like, this is pretty cush. This is all right. I don't have to answer the phone. They do my laundry. I just, I already have clothes to wear, so I'm golden,
Sure.
I'm saying, yeah,
Sure.
yeah. I could watch TV sometimes, and the food isn't that bad, and I got pretty comfortable there until I wasn't, and then I got out, and I was scared. I was scared because I wanted to get high, but I didn't want to. It was, I was safe in jail, I didn't have to,
Right.
run around and manage. Yeah. So I got out of jail, and of course I got high a couple more times, several more, a lot. And then I ended up being pregnant with my second son, who is 2 now. And that was it for me. That was
So you're done then, because
Yeah,
you've been
yeah.
clean 3 years, so that means you
Yeah.
at least 2 now. So you got pregnant.
and that was it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was it. And it wasn't like I don't want to say that it was miraculous or anything like that, because it wasn't, because it took me that whole time, from the first time that I shot up to that moment of time to be like, I don't want to do this to myself. I knew the answers, especially because I'd had experience with AA and NA before.
And an entire
and treatment.
60+ day
Yeah.
treatment. I mean, you've heard the language, the rundown.
Yeah, so, and it was just, I prayed. I still don't even know what I'm doing when I pray, but I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, because I was so desperate to never ever have to hide from the police again, or be that paranoid, or be that scared, or be that angry. I prayed to find myself again. I prayed to find the life that I wanted, I needed again, because I was hurting myself. There were a couple of times where, like, all my joints froze up, and I think that was probably because I wasn't eating and I was just like throwing drugs in my bloodstream. And I wasn't sleeping, so.
Yeah.
And when it was happening, then I was like, I just have a really bad flu, But hindsight is like my kidneys were probably failing,
Right.
or something crazy. I never want to go through that again. And from the moment that I found out that I was pregnant to today, I don't want to say that I haven't had the desire to use, but I haven't used.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
That's amazing.
the first year was like, I'm just. I'm not going to do drugs. I'm not going to drink.
Kind of, you had white knuckling it, so to speak.
I did.
And you were like, nah.
I did. I was so embarrassed and so ashamed to go back into the rooms yet, once again, 12 years of doing that. And I still don't get it. I didn't want to walk in there and be like, I just totally wrecked my life. I hate myself, and what do I do next? I didn't want to do that. I was so ashamed.
So when you're white knuckling it, and it worked, obviously. I mean, you are clean today. But do you believe that was maybe a little bit? Do you think your chances of success would have been a little bit better had you been in the rooms? It's hard to say.
It's hard to say. They certainly would have helped, because now, I mean, I still struggle on a daily basis with what I'm supposed to be like, how I'm supposed to feel, and the last year has been such a challenge for me, mostly because I have this preconceived notion that I'm supposed to be, this person buying a house
pressures,
with
to some extent.
a 750 credit score, and all these. I was supposed to be this, but I'm still achieving these goals. But that first year, I just wasn't doing drugs, and it was crazy.
If I don't do drugs, I'm good.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was hard. I was scared because now I have this other baby. My first baby was taken from me. I'm scared of this and scared of that, and gosh, it was just. And I still allowed myself to be in a situation where my life wasn't healthy at all. I still allowed. I guess I could say that I was still in the mindset or mentality of being in an active addiction, because I still wasn't doing the things that I needed to love myself. I was in a really abusive relationship, and I allowed that to continue. Until, it wasn't very long after Sam was born, my son Sam, that I just, I was like, I had enough. This isn't the life that I want. I want my child to be safe and happy and healthy. I want to be safe, happy, and healthy, and that's, that's what I did. I made those changes, and now I went through an outpatient treatment program. An intensive outpatient. I don't think that if I was not pregnant, I probably would not have been successful in that outpatient treatment program. the pregnancy really pushed me in the right direction. That's been my motivation, is to be a good parent, you know, to give my son a life that he doesn't have to run from, you know, that he doesn't have to mask or hide or numb himself out from, you know. So today, that is a big motivation that I have for myself and for my son, is that I want our lives to be happy and healthy, and I want my son to know that he can do anything he wants, you know. I'll still be supportive, or I'll still love him, and I want to be able to foster that for him. And I want to, you know, my first son, he'll be 6 in July. I want to be a part of his life. It might be, you know, his dad is like, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to trust you with our child again. And today I have to be okay with that, you know. That's really hard, you know. So that's just my goal, is to be a really good mom, to be the person that I want to be, and I'm still trying to figure out what that is every day.
Right.
I just know that being that young kid in AA really did. I knew of that solution, like the self-help deal. I knew of that, like, and I knew what that was, you know. That's part of how I get to stay clean today, is I participate in things like that. And I really want people to know that I've seen, you know, for my own story, I did have a really tough childhood. It was not a good time, you know. I had a tough childhood. I had a tough time during adolescence, and still into adulthood. Like, I'm still having a little bit of a hard time. But I want people to know that it's not really going to matter if you had a good childhood or a bad childhood, or like you know, your parents loved you or whatever. Being addicted and being the addict, that's, if you are an addict, that's always going to be the same. Like, I don't know about you guys, but it was really hard for me to come to terms that I hated myself. I hated myself, and you know, because who does that? A person who loves themselves or cares about themselves doesn't put themselves in situations where they're probably going to get their head blown off, or get shot, you know, or stabbed, or to, you know, do drugs. Like somebody who loves themselves doesn't do that. But being addicted is going to be, I think, right around the same struggle. At the very end of my using days, like right before I got arrested again, and you know what? When they arrested me, they weren't very nice. Like, if you guys can imagine, the cops jumped me, probably because I wasn't a safe person, especially considering I was high on drugs and I probably had a weapon, you know, and I did have a gun. They jumped me and I resisted, and then they tased me, you know, like, I was not okay. To come to that point, I didn't believe that I was going to be able to fix this. Didn't know. I was scared. I started believing that you know, I was going to be doing something that involved drugs, and that's what I was going to die from. I was either going to like OD, or, you know, die from some weird complication like blood infection.
We're trying to cut out your middleman.
Yeah, or get shot by the cops, because
Yeah.
I had that mentality. I was like,
And then you were doing a lot of drugs for long periods of time, to where you were, I mean, like you said, quite incoherent, despite believing that you were.
that I was fine.
that you
Yeah.
thought you were fine. Yeah.
So do you think that getting the hope back really began with being pregnant, and that's kind of where you've been? It sounds like you're remembering how awful it was, those feelings of paranoia, of being chased, kind of, and then you're also focusing on the future of what you want your child's life to look like. I mean, where did it really turn over for you from this hopeless situation where you think, this is how I'm going to die, more or less, like, this is going to be my life forever, into I can do something with my life. I can change it into something that I want it to be, or a future for my child. Like, what really transitioned that?
So it was that this little bit of time while I was in jail, I had time to dry out, clean up, and get a little bit of something back.
You gotta see the real world for a second.
Yeah,
'Cause it sounds like that's a big deal when you're like really in it. Like you said, like I didn't think I was that bad. Like you do to some extent, like maybe not need, but a clear head maybe brings a little bit of wake up, right?
Yeah. So this sergeant, who his job was to make sure everybody was still alive and breathing, at a certain time every day, and so he'd come through and I'd be sleeping like it was like 9 o'clock in the morning or something. I'd be sleeping, and he woke me up one time. He has to make sure that I'm like still moving or whatever. So he'll like, tap my foot or whatever, and he said something. I can't remember what it was, and he's like, "Do you have kids?" It's like I have one. He's like, "Well, we'll see if you love him enough to stay away from here." Because I think the conversation went like, "Well, I can't wait to see you back here again," because I was like halfway through the time that I had to serve. I was like, "I won't ever be back here." And he's like, "Well, we'll see if you love your son enough for that." So it was kind of like, I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I remember that I was like, me never coming back here again will never ever have anything to do with how much I love my son. Because
I think that is like illustrative of just the fundamental misunderstanding our society holds.
Disconnect.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is like just a true. There's like a one-liner, like illustrative of just like how misunderstood addiction is.
Yeah. So
and the addict then in that,
I love my kids. I love my kids.
But I think a lot of the some of the science kind of says that essentially like your brain essentially in a lot of ways comes to prioritize these over drugs and alcohol in ways like more than like like in a survival way, like more than like food and water and basic shelter and basic like needs, and in as much as like humans are driven toward survival, so it's like the strongest urges that you can possess like are then like shifted toward drugs and alcohol.
Exactly. That's exactly exactly what happened. So yeah, it wasn't gonna matter how much I loved my children. That's always gonna be that. Like I love my kids. And I remember being like, if I get high again, it's not going to be because I don't love my kids. Well, Sam wasn't born yet then, but so now today, you know what? I'm almost to my 3-year mark.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
It's
awesome.
huge.
I've been able to, repair my life as much as I can to this point in time. I have the opportunity now to, Skype my other son. He lives in South Carolina, and like I said, I got the opportunity to visit him in January, and his dad and his wife, and they welcomed me into their home, and it was a really good time for all of us. And my son and me and his dad, got to talk about what happened and how that affected him. And that was really hard stuff to go through, but I've been able to slowly, and it took time, and I had to put more effort into it, and I had to remember that like every day I don't ever want to have to struggle like that again. I don't, want to come to terms where I hated myself and where I realizing that I become the person that I never wanted to be. Every day I get up and I thank God for the blessings that I have today, for the work that I'm willing to do for my life today, and hopefully to help others come to terms with being alive and living. So one of the coolest things about being in recovery this time around is that I especially get to see other people who are getting their lives back, who have their children back, who have who have themselves back, who get to be mothers, who get to be fathers, who get to, you know, finally move on with their life. There's a lot of friends that I have in recovery that I used to use with, and that's cool because I get to
See him on the other side.
yeah,
so to speak.
we all get to see each other in a better place.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. Today and for a long time, for, you know, still to this day, I've used like materialistic things to be the goal to why, to, you know, to keep moving forward. You know, like I felt like, you know, when I wanted to be a doctor and stuff, I wanted my life to be okay. I wanted to have a house and the white picket fence and have my life taken care of. And today it's not quite like that. I don't really have a picket fence. I live in an apartment. You know, I drive a mom wagon. But these are all things that I got to work towards. You know, I've been employed for 2 years now, which is like amazing because for a while there I was not employable at all. The same job for 2 years. You know, I get paid on a regular basis. I get to pay my rent. I'm working on my credit score. I get to have a comfortable life today, and I get to be happy. I get to choose that every day because there isn't any, like, I don't have the cops chasing me. I don't have to worry about getting arrested. I don't have to worry about where I'm going to get my next rig or my next bag. Like, I don't have to worry about any of that, and that's just amazing. And some days I do forget.
Oh yeah.
That's where it came from, and I let crazy little things bother me, like the mailman hasn't been to my house, and you know, and I'm waiting for a bill, like, because I want to pay that, you know. I let these crazy little things that don't even matter be a big focus on sometimes why I feel like I can have a crap day, you know. But yeah.
I think we move forward, you know, and it's probably, I don't think there's probably really anything like wrong with like, you know, having new goals and like, you know, I guess you like appreciate and are very delighted in the fact that a lot of the problems that you once had, you don't have, and some of the problems you have now don't really compare to the ones you had. But you still, you know, I know you have it's obvious like you have a drive to, you know, move forward and continue and progress. And those, I actually like goals and like growth is probably appropriate. But it sounds like, you know, you said you wanted to be a doctor and your life would be okay. Like you would be okay. It sounds like maybe that is not as so much like an outward chasing thing. I mean, in some ways it looks like that, but like you said, you had, you know, hated yourself before, and now it seems like maybe a lot of that is an internal thing, you know. And I think there's probably a balance, you know, like you want to have like these comforts that help you exist in a way that's, you know, I mean, people want somewhere to live, they want something to drive, they want food to eat, you know. I mean, that's like obvious, but like maybe it's something of an internal thing too, you know, like kind of an internal like resting in yourself, not to get like ridiculous, but like some of it in like an internal like home, you know, you're kind of like you're okay in your own skin, you know, and maybe that's part of your journey too, and it sounds like that's part of it.
That's a huge part of my journey because I you know, yeah, I want to come to a point in my life where I'm comfortable and I'm okay, and I don't have to worry about where I'm going to go next, or you know, when I was using, my biggest worries were like, how am I going to be able to stay high? When I was a kid, I was like, where am I going to go? And now that I'm in this life today, I don't have to worry about any of that. I can say that I'm not quite to a point where I feel comfortable with how things are, because this is also really new for me.
Growing pains.
Yeah.
Those probably won't ever completely go away.
Yeah, because that's the whole
Change phases
like the
of life,
core
new adjustments.
core beliefs and things, like those things that I went through as a kid, and like the ideas that I got from it, like I don't belong anywhere, because, you know, I really feel like my mom's family really didn't. I mean, she was the baby for the family, so everybody got stuck taking care of her mistakes and like just taking care of her, you know. And as kids, we're part of that, and they really resented my mother for that, and that kind of carried off into me, you know. So really, and then being in foster homes and things like that, I really felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Like I didn't, like nobody cared for me or loved me. I have these parents, and they just don't know how to do that, and that was really frustrating. So yeah, but I get to be in this moment today, and I get to I get to create that for myself, and I'm comfortable with doing that. There's like a sense of peace that I have every day. I get up a lot earlier. Like I was up at like 5:30 this morning, and I get up and I make this time for myself in the morning where I'm able to just chill out, and I don't have to make snacks and I don't have to do laundry. I just hang out with my cup of coffee, and go over like my Bible app or emails or whatever, and just have that time for myself. And every day I try to make it a point to come to this peace that I know that I can have. My son, he wakes up every morning, he looks for me, and he's like, Mom, and that's the coolest thing, because I'm like, I get to tell him good morning, and I get to give him a hug and tell him that I love him. That moment of peace that I have every day, or those moments of peace that I have every day, make time for myself to have. Some days are like, they're the best thing that I get to have, because it is home, and it is somewhere that I belong. And not only is it somewhere that I belong, it's somewhere that my child belongs also. And life is good today. I don't have a lot of complaints today. I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I have, especially to be able to share my story. My pastor sent me this like link thing that you guys did, or whatever, this thing about telling a story, and I was scared for a second. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't think I'm ready for that yet, because I was so worried and ashamed about how do I tell people that I'm an IV drug user, or is that like, does that freak people out? It freaks me out. I don't know. It freaks me out, and just in our little community, it is so hard to see people still struggling, especially with like heroin and meth, and I know what it looks like, and I know that our community is affected by it. But if I don't get up and share about how you can recover from this, and this doesn't have to be the end of your story. There's so many people that I know that this was their end. They died doing this, or some. I've got a couple of, like, one guy was like shot and then burned and then like left out in the butte. Like, that was my friend, and that was something that had to do with drugs and stuff. So this doesn't have to be what your life is. Like, you can come to a point in your life where it's so beautiful and so amazing. And you don't have to hate yourself anymore, and you can help people. That's what it is for me, I think, is that I eventually want to be able to help people. And part of it is letting people know that, hey, I'm a recovering drug addict, and I used to stick a needle in my arm every day. And if that weirds me out, then maybe the story isn't for you, but there are people who need to hear it, and there are people who need to know it. And
I think families that need to know it too.
Yeah.
Families that need to know it, absolutely.
Not just like those in it. I mean, definitely those in it, but sometimes people around those who are using too are thinking, is this where it all ends, Or maybe this doesn't need to be it,
I can only imagine like what families feel. After I got clean, my sister still struggled with using drugs, and that was her thing. It made everybody tense, like what was going to happen to my sister. And I always envisioned that like the troopers were going to show up, because I'm listed as her next of kin, that the troopers were going to show up and that they were going to tell me that my sister OD'd and died or whatever. And that was always such a really hard fear. And I resented her for that. I was like, how would you do this to the rest, to us, she's in treatment now, and it's a year and a half long program. She's doing great and amazing. And then people need to hear this. Families need to hear this. People who are currently struggling with active addiction need to hear this. They need to know that there is an answer, and there is a way to recover, and it's not just the person who uses that's affected. So, with that, I'm really grateful and happy to be able to share my story with you guys today.
Thank you so much. I think it's, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Your story does not need to end here. Your story can go on, and it can be written in a way that you said leads to somewhere that's filled with hope and beauty and possibility. So truly, thank you so much. We know this is a vulnerable task. We know this is asking for certain amounts of, perhaps some discomfort at times, but
it really, I think, does bring some true hope and insight to that people affected, and some humanity to the people that go through addiction, because we don't see people go from like human being to totally losing their humanity. Like, they're still human beings, and they go through this incredibly confusing and difficult thing that we are coming to understand as addiction. And I just thank you so much. Congrats on 3 years. Congrats on rebuilding. Like, inspiring. So thank you so much. To wrap things up, as Aaron would say, another great episode. Anyway, yeah, you and I for the Kenai.